Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be outstanding to the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Long.
Well, good evening and welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Mummerimina people as the traditional and regional custodians of the land on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's council meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Well, thank you, councillors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Well, good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday the 29th of July 2024. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. Item number 2, apologies. So we have a full house, so there are none. Moving on to item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associate. Are there any declaration from councillors? Councillor James, did you wish to make a declaration of interest?
I assume, Mr Mayor, that as soon as that item has been brought forward, I'd leave the room.
Well, it's customary to actually declare that interest now,
I will
so
be
you will.
declaring an interest on 7 Mile Beach.
Okay, so that would be item 7.3. Thank you very much. All right, no other declarations of interest. We're now heading to our omnibus items. First one being item 4.1, confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the council meeting held on the 8th of July 2024 have been circulated. Are there any matters arising? There being none, we now move into 4.2, Mayor's Communications, and my diary entries from the 9th of July to today, the 29th of July, have been circulated, and I also thank the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, for representing me at the LGAT General Meeting and AGM, and I table those. I now move on to a thank you card that we received from Alicia Hunter, who received a council grant to compete on the National 10-pin Bowling Championships. And Alicia writes, Dear Clarence City Council, thank you for supporting me to attend the National 10-pin Bowling Championships in Canberra. I had a fantastic time away with the Tasmanian team. I really appreciate your help so that I was able to go. And that's signed by Alicia Hunter. And I table her lovely card and thank you for taking the time to write to us. Item 4.3, council workshops as listed in the agenda. Item 4.4, tabling a petition. CEO, are there any petitions?
Not that I'm aware of, Mayor.
Sorry, I wish to make a query around the workshops as listed in the agenda.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Walker, please. Yes.
Yes, thank you. And for the benefit of those watching, when workshops are conducted, some matters come for us with discussion, sometimes with briefing or memos and sometimes without. And in the case of superannuation, whilst we had a discussion, this discussion happened, I think, in the absence of the fact that in 2004, a 9% adjustment was added to all councillor allowances in lieu of superannuation, and that is a very important point that should be brought about any debate around superannuation. That was put in there as an adjustment for the fact that councillors don't receive it. I think another matter that should have been, should really be noted for any submission that any council chooses to make is that councillors right now can salary sacrifice or allowance sacrifice and get the same 15% concessional rate on their contributions that other people are able to do. And I think it would be very important to note that the 2018 Board of Inquiry, I think it was the Tasmanian Industrial Commission, concluded that it wasn't appropriate at this time, and again reinforcing the fact that we do not have an employee-employer relationship with councils. We in fact have an employee-employer relationship with voters.
Right, moving on to 4.4, tabling a petition. CEO, are there any petitions?
No, not that I'm aware of, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to 4.5, reports from outside bodies. The first one, the Copying Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority. Councillor Walker. Thank you. Tasways South, I note the quarterly report to 30 June has been received. Councillor Warren, do you wish to make any other contribution? Thank you. Moving on to Tas Water Corporation, I can report that as a member of the Local Government Owners Reference Group Expert Advisory Group, Then we met on the 24th of July to receive an update from Taswater on the Price and Service Plan 5 and community engagement around this. From my perspective, and I'm sure we can all agree, that it's essential, particularly in this cost of living crisis, that bills are affordable and that Taswater's other priorities ought to include fixing leaks and responding to faults and protecting and enhancing waterways and catchments. Also, as a member of Taswater's recruitment committee, we're meeting next Monday to review the shortlisted applicants for the chair position. Moving on to the Greater Hobart Committee, a meeting has been scheduled for the 13th of August, and I'll be in a position to provide an update at our next council meeting, which will be held on the 19th of August. The South East Region Development Association, SERDA, a recent meeting occurred on the 17th of July, where Mayor Rod McDonald of Tasman Council was elected president, and I retained the position of deputy president. Mayor Cheryl Arnold of Glamorgan Spring Bay was elected as SERDA's representative to the BEST board, and that's the Business and Employment South East Tasmania board. We also, at that meeting, received updates on the South East Economic Infrastructure Strategy Project Review, the South East Jobs Hub and Training Facility at BEST, the Regional Development Australia RDA TAS, South East Traffic Solutions Projects, the Wailangta MTB Trail Project and the Local Government Reform Project. Colleagues, are there any other reports from Council and special committees and other representative bodies to be tabled today? Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to table the minutes from the recent Bicycle Advisory Working Group meeting, which was held Friday, June 21st.
Thank you. Are there any other reports to be tabled? Right, there being none, moving on to 4.6, the weekly briefing reports. The weekly briefing reports of the 8th, 15th and the 22nd of July 2024 have been circulated to councillors. Are there any matters arising? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to refer Council to the 15th of July 2024 to item 13.
Page 13.
Correction, page 13. In the opening paragraph of the Council promotion of elector poll, it says, and I quote, "In line with discussion of the 24th of June 2024 workshop, Council has implemented a community awareness campaign regarding the AFLW elector poll to educate the public on what the elector poll is and how they can vote." Unquote. My question is that what Council's decision was when it made the decision to obviously put forward the utilisation of either the two ovals on the golf course, or one of each on the Charles Hand and the the former Rosny golf course. So in that paragraph it says to educate the public on what the elector poll is and how they can vote. Could I have some clarification on that as to whether or not that education of the public will in fact provide both sides of the argument that the elector poll is about, and that is those that want to save the parks, and obviously those that want to proceed with the high performance centre. So may I seek some clarification?
Take your seat, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I call upon Ms Wicks, if you actually go past the introductory paragraph to the second paragraph of that weekly briefing report, it talks about an initiative process, an investment of $800 on a Facebook campaign to educate the public on the elector poll, to actually publicise the fact that there's an elector poll there. As you know, Council has a position on this issue. As far as the elector poll is concerned, we're agnostic. We're not here to influence individuals as a council. As individual councillors, of course, that's our right to be able to do that, to have different positions on this, as members of the Clarence community. So it's not been promoting or using ratepayers' funds to promote one side of the argument or another. It's about educating the public that there is a poll underway. This is how people ought to vote, and there are links telling them or informing them as to where they can find out further information about both sides of that debate. Ms Wicks, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, through you, Mayor. It was more referring to the TEC and finding that source.
Thank you, Ms Wicks. Any other questions, Councillor James?
is on the 22nd of July 2024, page 14, the appeal against Council's decision at 162A Flagstaff Gully Road, Lindisfarne. In the actual document, it refers to the applicant has subsequently exercised their statutory right to appeal against that decision. The grounds of appeal are as follows. Condition 6, which relates to the provision of public open space, and that is excessive and is unclear in what is required to be provided. My question is it unclear, and also what is required to be provided?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I would have thought that's sort of part of the appeal process, but Mr Maher, is there anything else you'd like to add to that answer?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for the question. Condition 6 specifically related to if the open space did not comprise 5% of the total space, then the remainder up to a total of 5% would be provided as cash in lieu. The clarity sought by the applicant is whether or not they're providing a larger parcel that would be in excess of the 5% or not. I mean, and as the Mayor has pointed out, that's one of those matters that when we get to a mediation will be subject to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr Maher. Councillor Jones. Does any other colleagues have any issues they'd like to raise with the weekly briefing reports? There being none, I note that we're now at the end of our omnibus items. Can I have a mover of the omnibus items? Councillor Chong, seconded Councillor Goyne. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Walker's against. All right, moving now to item number 5, public question time. We have 5.1 public questions on notice. We have a number of questions tonight. Ms Terry Polgleis, Ms Sharon von Berta has 2 questions. Ms Bradley Walker has 2 questions. As are listed in the agenda. CEO, could you please read the questions and provide the answers?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start first of all with Ms Sharon von Berto's 2 questions and provide a response. The questions relate to the AFL High Performance Centre, and the first question reads, if Rosny is chosen as a site for the AFL High Performance Centre, will the draft terms of the heads of agreement negotiated by Clarence City Council CEO between the Council and the Tasmanian Department of State Growth for the facility's operation be approved or otherwise by Council in open or closed section of the relevant Council meeting? And the second question is, if the deliberations and decision are made in the closed section of a future Council meeting in line with open and transparent decision making, will the final terms of the heads of agreement be released to the public as soon as possible after the completion of the agreement? The answer to both those questions is as follows. Consistent with our recent practice, negotiation of terms will be workshopped with councillors on a confidential basis with the intention that the final document for approval be submitted to open council, noting that some commercially sensitive elements need to be approved in closed meeting. However, key terms would be made public through the open agenda process. It is our aim to make any agreement as transparent as possible. Next question comes from Mr Terry Polgleis, also in relation to the AFL High Performance Centre elector poll. And the question is, it is being reported widely that the purported $200,000 cost of the elector poll has created a 0.3% rise in the rates for the people of Clarence. As this is a 1-year additional cost to Council, how does Mayor Blomley justify the rate rise and his media commentary supporting it? The answer to that question is as follows. When Council begins its budget process, all expenditure and income is reviewed each year, including recurring costs and any new budget requests. The budget process is not focused on simply increasing expenditure on prior year levels. We review each program, including all income and expenses. For 2024-25, the cost of the elector poll is an example of a one-off expense included in the total budget bottom line. We estimated the cost of the elector poll to be $200,000 based on advice from the Tasmanian Electoral Commission. If the electopole had not been included, the budget increase would have been 6.18%, but with the $200,000 included, it meant the budget needed to increase by 6.48%. Hence, the cost of including the electopole required an increase of 0.3% from the prior year's budget. For the 25-26 budget, we will again review all expenditure requests, and the cost of the electopole, like any other one-off costs, will no longer be included. And the next two questions are from Mr Bradley Walker. And the first question relates to antisocial and illegal activities. The question reads as follows. Council have previously suggested the community should be taking an active role in helping to stop antisocial and illegal activities in their community. As colder months are upon us, illegal cutting and removal of firewood in reserves is increasing. What measures does the council want individuals to take when personally witnessing wood hookers conducting these activities, and what further process or progressive actions does the council take towards such individuals taking part in this illegal action? The answer to that question is as follows. Collection of firewood on council reserves or Crown land is illegal. Council's Public Places Bylaw 2018 prohibits the removal of vegetation on council land, and we can take enforcement action. Illegal collection of firewood should be immediately reported to Tasmania Police. Additionally, council should also be notified so that investigation can occur. Where there is sufficient evidence to prosecute those who illegally collect firewood from council land, council may initiate prosecution action or take other suitable steps to address the issue. If purchasing from a firewood supplier, it is important to check and make sure that the wood has not been illegally sourced. Reputable firewood dealers should be able to provide assurances as to where the wood has come from. Purchasing wood from suppliers who are members of the Australian Firewood Association is an easy way to be confident that wood has been sourced legally. Mr Walker's second question relates to councillors' personal donations to parties and groups. And the question reads as follows. How does the council see councillors who make personal donation to parties or groups that are actively and directly working towards projects, proposals, development applications or general matters that require further council consideration or approval? Whether this is seen as a conflict of the code of conduct they work under and or as a conflict of interest that would affect the council's ability to vote on such a matter. The answer to that question is that the Local Government Act 1993 and the Council's Code of Conduct require all councillors to declare pecuniary and non-pecuniary conflicts of interest relating to matters before council. A councillor as an individual citizen may make a personal donation, financial or in kind, to an entity that they choose to support. If a matter relating to that entity comes before the council for consideration, it is up to the individual councillor to manage and declare any conflict of interest that they may have or may be perceived to have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, CEO. 5.3, there are no answers to previous questions taken on notice. 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the gallery this evening? Mr Figg, name and suburb, please.
Before I ask my question, and I ask for a bit of indulgence here, us old fellas who have to hold an agenda of over 500 pages, not all of us have good backs nowadays, and I notice there's a lectern over there that I would like to be used up here so that we can at least relieve our pain and suffering here by putting the agenda down on the lectern.
Well, Mr Figg, that's a point well made, but spare a thought, please, for those of us who have to read 500 plus pages.
Or listen, yes, I know. My question is to your staff through you, Mr Mayor. I've noticed, and this relates partly to a DA I'm trying to put in for Phil on my property, which is probably the 6th DA that I've put in. There seems to be a difficulty relating around a waterway overlay, and I noticed that the stormwater system has been changed to a waterway. Can you please explain why stormwater is now classified as waterway?
Thank you, Mr Figg. Mr Maher, are you able to answer that, please?
For you, Mayor, I'll take that on notice, but I might need a little bit more detail.
Thank you.
Around a particular area, or do I just assume that it's Mr Figg's property?
We can assume that, Mr Figg, it's your property? Yep, thank you. And maybe then, Mr Maher, we can engage with Mr Figg tomorrow if we need further information.
Certainly, sir.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Maher. Thank you, Mr Figg. Any other questions from the gallery? Right, there being none, we move now on to item number 6, deputations by members of the public. Members of the public making a deputation are reminded that they are limited to 3 minutes and a timer will sound at the end of that time. In the interest of fairness, I will strictly enforce the time limit to the best of my ability. CEO, do we have deputations this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 deputations this evening. Our first deputation is from Mr Matthew Goggin in regard to the planning application for 300 Pittwater Road.
Mr Goggin, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, Deputy Mayor, CEO, councillors. 1 + 1 = 3. This is what remote golf tourism pioneer Mike Kaiser discovered when he opened the second golf course at Bandon Dunes. He feared that building a second golf course would double the daily expenses, requiring the resort to double the daily visitors to break even, a difficult task in a remote golf course location in the Oregon coast. Kaiser believed that the land was perfect for golf. Interesting topography, sandy soil, and right next to the ocean. Sound familiar? So he built the second course more out of passion for the game and love of great architecture. He knew the second course would be great, even if it didn't guarantee financial success. What happened next changed the entire golf tourism landscape. 1 + 1 didn't equal 2. It didn't equal 1.5. Like he feared, 1 + 1 = 3. Bandon tripled its number of green fees, tripled its visitors, tripled its economic effect on the local community, and is now the main economic driver for an entire region of Oregon. This led Kaiser to his second discovery. 1 course is a curiosity, 2 courses is a destination. You may visit a single great golf course if you're already planning to be in the area, but probably not making a special trip, especially somewhere remote. But expand with a second great golf course and you become a destination. Now visitors will go out of their way, plan dedicated trips, stay extra days, play multiple rounds, be willing to get on a plane from all parts of the country or even fly halfway across the world to visit. These 2 epiphanies have proven true over and over. In fact, it's already proven itself at Barnbougle Dunes. It was Mike Kaiser who convinced Richard Sattler that he must build the second golf course at Lost Farm. Now Barnbougle is the biggest employer in the region. The economic benefits for the local community are obvious, but the social benefits of a strong local economy shouldn't be underestimated. But our goals are more than financial. We believe that the 7 Mile Beach Reserve has potential beyond a great golf destination. There is an opportunity to create more tracks, trails and public facilities for all users, not just golf visitors. There is an opportunity to create new venues for passive and active recreation clubs that the local community has been desperate for. By leveraging the success and economic activity from the golf business, we are committed to being a catalyst for making the 7 Mile Beach Reserve the jewel in the crown for Clarence and the local community. But first, we need to build a destination. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Goggin. CEO, is there a second deputation?
Thank you, Mayor. Our second deputation tonight is from Mr Michael Figg in regard to the motion on notice on tonight's agenda regarding change of commencement time for ordinary council meetings.
Mr Figg, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. We don't have much time to actually see the agenda as members of the public, and I was concerned about the amount of time we have to read it and how fast it's going to be implemented. So I decided to, on Friday, ask for the permission to speak. Although I see Councillor Hunter is well-meaning, I think that she's mistaken in her views in this motion. No evidence of community consultation or need has been presented in what I've seen so far. I had a look at what Council's inclusion and guiding principles are, and as far as the community is concerned, it talks about equity, inclusiveness and accessibility. Well, I haven't seen that yet. The guiding principles also ensure their voices are heard. I'm the only one that you're hearing from. I'm a member of the community and a ratepayer. I would assume that there are others that feel the same as I do. Evidence informed. I haven't seen any evidence to change. Age friendly. Collaborative approaches, good community governance and leaders. You represent us. Yet, the reasons for this change seem to be for aldermen and staff, because Councillor Hunter points out alignment with other councils, safety for staff and councillors, operational efficiencies, so that's 3 points out of 4. And then the fourth one is community convenience and inclusivity and engagement. It also states that council's operations would run smoother and more efficient. Does that mean you don't now? And if you don't, why not? An inclusive community engages all the citizens in decision-making, processes that affect our lives. It will affect mine and many others that have families. Show me where community has been part of these decisions. Why the urgencies to have it at next meeting? Why is it being pushed through so fast? Where is the community input for this urgent change, as it will come in force at the next meeting? I am concerned, Mr Mayor, and I bring that to your attention.
Thank you, Mr Figg. As at the end of our item number 6, we now move on to item number 7. I advise that Council now intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. 7.1, development application for 160 Acton Road, Acton Park, with access over 146 Acton Road, 2-lot subdivision, 1 existing and 1 new. I'll call for a mover of the motion, please. Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Mulder.
May I rise simply to say that this is an excellent proposal. It's a subdivision of existing land. There's not much you can say against it, I wouldn't have thought, as it's the kind of infill, albeit not urban, that we so desperately want and need. But that aside, I think it's an appropriate use of the land. My only question is that's a very complicated access now coming off Acton Road, which is from what is already an internal lot. Yet if you look at the plan, there's a perfectly good multiple access, which is probably designed for that block anyway, coming off Threadbow Drive. I'm just wondering why we've allowed a complicated dual lane access to a internal lot when it's actually when the lot itself could be actually accessed from another course. But apart from that, and I look forward to the answer, but the answer to that question obviously will not sway the way that I'm going to vote on this, but it's just one of those questions, is when there's a logical solution, why aren't we adopting it?
Councillor Mulder, thank you. Mr Mayor, are you able to provide an answer, please?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Mulder, for the question. The property or the accesses of Threadbow Drive that you mentioned are private accesses. This property has no legal right of access to it, and we can't compel that it has gain a right over an adjacent private land.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Hume.
I think it's a fairly straightforward matter as per the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution to this item? There being none, Councillor Mulder, do you want to reply? We'll put the vote. That is that the development application for 2-lot subdivision at 160 Acton Road, Acton Park, be approved subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now to 7.2. Planning application for 64 Skillion Road, Howrah, change of use to visit accommodation. I'll call for a mover of the motion. Councillor James. Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've circulated an amended motion.
Oh, my apologies. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, thank you. So thank you, Councillor James. So just before we move on, Councillor Kennedy, are you happy to second? Right, thank you very much. So the amended motion, is that on the screen, Ms Ellis? It is? Great, thank you. And that has been circulated, colleagues? Right, thank you. Councillor James,
Yes,
this is the amended motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's on the board. The only difference is in fact the advice section, which I sought on Friday at our briefing that be included as part of A, B and C, and Mr. Maher has very kindly included those items in the advice. Now, it's as advice, and it's basically what a normal permit has to spell out in relation to after 2 years from the date in which it's granted, unless developments have been substantially commenced, that permit will lapse. Part B, please note there is a general obligation not to cause a statutory nuisance under the Local Government Act. And Part 3, due to the size of the building, the number of rooms and potential number of visitors for the proposed use, there may be a requirement for a change of use under the Building Act 2016. So I seek Council's support, and I'll leave it to that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just happy to support that amended motion. They keep on coming. And thank you to Councillor James for doing that extra bit of work on that.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution on this item? Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall be brief. I thank Councillor James for bringing forward the amendment in the same fashion as we did with Lenina Street from memory, just clarifying those provisions under the building code around number of occupants and so on. The tools, of course, continue to remain deficient, although I am pleased to report to colleagues that further to the motion that our council passed in relation to short stay accommodation, work is progressing on that at the local government sector level, and in fact a report, a position paper is expected to be provided to members of Legat in September this year, so I'm looking forward to that. But I did want to make a comment in respect of this report as it talks about things like character of an area. And I started to address my mind to what do we mean by an area? And at what point does the character of an area become affected? And in respect of this, we're talking about saturation of visitor accommodation to an extent where an area becomes no longer potentially as residential as it may have been. And what do those limits begin to look like? And this is not something that we've exercised our minds to as a collective. And I do foreshadow, and I have had some discussion with council officers in respect of this concept, that I think we as council ought to start addressing our minds to, when we assess these matters, understanding what we mean by area and what we mean by the character of the area, and at what point does the saturation point come in relation to continued approval of visitor accommodation to then be deemed to have changed that area. So I think that we probably need to look at starting to take some advice, potentially legal advice and also planning advice, as to whether there are any mechanisms that we can begin to consider, and given the limitations we have and the unregulated nature of the state government's approach thus far, and let's hope that changes into the future, because the tools are terribly insufficient for us, as we all know, and we've lamented repeatedly in this chamber. But I just wanted to foreshadow that. I won't be opposing in the moment. I'll be voting in support. But I think we need to start looking at whether we bring this forward through council, through workshop, through further advice, because it does occur to me that there are starting to be potential saturation points in areas that may give us some leverage to relook at some of these sorts of applications. And I thank Councillor James for bringing forward the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not anti-B&B. I also think that there is a role for that and there's a place for that. We seem to forget we're in the middle of a housing supply crisis. And here we are doing everything in our power to encourage demand. By taking these plots of property, and this is right in a newly built residential area. This is new house. This is not a spare house that your parents left behind when they died, and you don't have a use for it. No, this is the sort of housing that we're supplying, that we're trying to supply to meet the housing crisis. And yet here we are, and we have no option, and I'm not anti-Airbnb, but here we have a case where, I'm making some assumptions here that an investor has bought this land, built this house, and now it's being turned into a commercial operation, as is their right. But why are we not charging commercial council rates for commercial properties? Why is the federal government so insistent on giving these people negative gearing, tax breaks, when all they're doing is they're reducing the supply of housing and further creating demand? And I think it's, we'll talk about this and we'll have workshops. This has not been an issue. This has been an issue for the last 3 or 4 years, as I recall. Yet here we are, eventually we might have a meeting about it sometime later on in the year. Well, I think, meetings are all very well, but there's a crisis here and we need something to do about this. And in relation to another thing, the critical thing about driving the demand, the rents and the price of housing is the price of land. The best check on the price of land and the price of housing is to increase supply so that it outstrips demand. Then you're in a situation where housing will become affordable again, because if you're going to build a house, you're going to sell a house, then you have to get a return on it, but you'll have to then meet the market. What you're seeing today is not market forces. It's not market forces matching the supply and demand. What you're seeing now is a cornering of the market, a restriction of supply, and the end is that the cost is what the market can bear. And that is what you're seeing here. That's what we're seeing here. And it's about high time we dug our heels in and started to reward supply instead of rewarding demand.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution to this item? Councillor Hume, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to make the point that I've made in previous debates when we talk about this issue around residential properties being used for visitor accommodation. And look, we do need a supply of housing. We need a supply of affordable housing. I'll be very interested to see what the LEGAP working group comes up with. But in relation to supply, I would also like to make the point that there are actually two supply and demand markets at work here. One is the supply and demand for housing, but the other one is the supply and demand for visitor accommodation. Tasmania, we have a booming tourism industry. We have increasing visitors. They dropped off during COVID, but they're coming back again. We are a very popular destination, and it's something that drives a lot of jobs and economic input in our economy, particularly into regional areas. It's one of our major industries. We need a supply of accommodation. Now, unless that supply is going to come from formal sources of accommodation, such as hotels, it's going to be met elsewhere. So there's also a question of if we're going to have issues with residential accommodation supplying this demand for our tourists, then how do we incentivise, how do we drive the development of those other formal sources of accommodation to try and take that demand off our housing? I think that's an important point, and I'll be very interested to see if the LEGAP working group actually addresses that in their report.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, thank you.
Thank you, and somewhere overlapping on the Venn diagram, I think, with what Councillor Hume has noted, does come around to hotels. And a couple of points to make. The airfares of 25 years ago are way more in today's dollars, pre-GST, than what we find ourselves today. So travel has become cheaper in not just real terms, but in nominal terms as well. Let's take a walk through memory lane of Clarence in the zany 80s, because fact even 90s, in fact even early aughts, because the Motel Jason is no longer around. That one on the top of the hill, which name escapes me near Rose Bay High, is now not city. There you go. That's now gone. So our city's grown. Tasmania's become a more popular destination. Airfares have gone down, and Clarence's response is less hotels. And when a hotel comes up to be fully invested with, we vote against it and we go to the lawyers with it. So that matter really is one of the impacts why we're going to see more and more of these. And we can't smash hotels and then wring our hands about the fact that Airbnbs or other forms of accommodation are coming out. Now, I don't know what this is going to be. I don't know whether it's going to be stays, Airbnb or something else. And I wonder whether there's whether we can be furnished with how this goes, because what are the rules on, we approve this, but do we have no say or understanding on where it might be listed? We assume that it's going to be one of the big platforms, but for all I know, this is just a proposal that's for people that are members of Extinction Rebellion to come down and have accommodation, or for that matter, maybe the H.R. Nichols Society as well. I don't know whether there's any discrimination around it or any processes to that, or whether it's just a case of you say it's visitor accommodation and then you do whatever you want. And if that's the case, I don't think we should be surprised when some of the outcomes are less than desirable, especially for the nearby community. So the rules say that we look at the application, we look at what the recommendations are. There aren't strong grounds for refusal, but this might be a one-off matter, but it is, again, that bigger ephemeral stuff that we need to be looking at.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor James, right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this matter is ongoing, and the Deputy Mayor did refer to what's happening at the local government association. Yep. And it's a step forward, because on a number of occasions I haven't supported the visitor accommodation because of the impact it has on the character of the area, and also a lifestyle that a lot of people who actually have residences close by, there is some impact upon their lifestyle. In this particular case, we've put in advice to be able to perhaps draw attention to the applicants that there is a number of matters under the Building Services Act that has to be addressed as part of any application proceeding towards the approval of this particular permit. So at this stage, there's still work in progress. It's ongoing, and I hope that down the track we will have some sort of method by which we can look at this a little bit more closely, and perhaps there may be some wriggle room within the planning scheme to be able to not only add advice, as is in this particular case, but also to be able to add some conditions. And so look forward to what the Deputy Mayor said in relation to that, and then hopefully we'll have some grounds to look at a little bit more closely, or Councillor Walker and Councillor Mulder, in order to be able to have a little bit more say on this matter. I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor James. I'll put the amended motion saying in the name of Councillor James. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 7.3, which is a planning application for 300 Pittwater Road, 7 Mile Beach, a golf course, sports and recreation and associated work. A call for a mover the motion. Councillor Hume, thank you. A seconder, Councillor Goyne, thank you. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, going back to the comments I was making about Tasmania's visitor economy, one of the things we're finding now is that the trend with golf courses is, rather than having local membership-based golf courses that people attend their local course on a regular occasion, the popular thing now is golf tourism. And I thank Mr Goggin for his proposal, for his deputation. This is certainly a great attraction that's going to bring a lot of visitors to our city. the attraction of the two golf courses, the 1 + 1 = 3, is certainly going to drive a lot of investment in our area. Of course, we are dealing with a planning application, and we're looking at the planning merits of it. And I note that, and congratulate the proponent on the fact that out of 119 representations received, 117, or 98.3%, are simply in support of the application without any concerns or objections. Having said that, those that did object to the application, I believe that the subjects of their representations has been very well addressed in the officer's report, and of course I will comment further on that should any councillors wish to make any observations on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I call on Councillor Gore, I just note for the benefit of those at home that Councillor Richard James did declare an interest in this item and he's left the chamber. So just for the purposes of noting that, Councillor Goyne, thank you.
Thank you, and yes, thank you, Mr Goggin, for speaking this evening. I've had the pleasure of meeting with him several times, and whilst I was initially sceptical of this proposal, particularly as a member of the ever-dwindling areas to safely ride your horse, he has allayed mine and the equestrian community's concerns, and I actually have great faith that he will do as he has said, and we will possibly have more trails, and maybe that lifelong dream of mine of galloping across a golf course might come to fruition. But
something that goes around laughing.
I can imagine. But yes, I do absolutely have great faith in the work that he's already done at the site, and having visited the site, I highly recommend anyone that is concerned to go and have a look. And I actually look forward to utilising the facilities. Whilst I probably won't be playing a round of golf, I'm sure I'll be going down for the restaurants and the other sort of facilities, and I seek colleague support.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Other colleagues wishing to... Councillor Hunter, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and for everyone's contributions. I was approached by members of the public when I first became a councillor who had concerns about this, probably similar to Councillor Goyne, around recreational use and natural values. And as time has gone on and I've read all the natural values reports and everything else associated with this DA, and I'm quite comfortable in the work that has gone on to date and the conditions that have been put into the permit. So I'm very comfortable in approving this today, and I look forward to seeing what comes of it in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't think there's anything really left to address as far as planning is concerned, and it is a planning item that we're talking about, but one thing I would like to add is that having been a resident of Clarence for just over 30 years, this is probably the most exciting thing to have happened in the area in my time of living there. And one of my voluntary roles as a Vice President of the Tasmanian chapter of a charitable global sporting fundraising organisation. It is being talked about, this golfing precinct is being talked about not just right around Australia, but right around the world. It is generating so much interest in these circles, and I am talking about the Carbine Club. So, yeah, bring it on. It's going to be something very special for our city. Thank you. I encourage colleagues to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Any other? Councillor Warren, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I too would like to thank Mr Goggin for his deputation and for bending the rules of maths. And I recognise that doubling the number of golf courses resulting in a threefold in return on investment isn't as snappy as 1 + 1 = 3, but it's more mathematically correct. I really like the idea of a destination golf course, and that people do come and stay longer. Regarding accommodation, the accommodation referred to earlier, which has currently under question, would not have served this area anyway. It's all about building the right accommodation in the right place, and I'm sure that there can be some sensitive development in that direction. It meets the planning laws, it meets with the community, it has a social licence. I'm happy to approve this.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Moulder, then the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Moulder.
Seniority, Mr Mayor. My contribution will be very brief. I support the golf course. I too have questions about, yes, one golf course, then two, but I think there's more than two already in this particular precinct, and some of them are experiencing a little bit of difficulty, but that's not my decision. That's the decision of the people who are putting up the money, and in this case it's not me. My only and we've had this discussion a lot, particularly in the context of a high-performance centre, so maybe there is a use for a golf course if this doesn't transpire. And I refer to the environmental report, or the attached report, and page 11, 4.3.1, fauna habitat. And I'll quote, "The site contains low-quality habitat for native fauna species due to its highly modified nature and lack of significant habitat features such as dense sites, over-mature trees, hollows, intact vegetation, etc." That's all down, I think, predominantly to the fact that it is infested with infested trees. The Pinus radiata that are populating that area, although dearly beloved by many in the south, in the 7 Mile Beach, who will almost go to their graves, or at least my graveside, if anyone were to touch any of these trees. The fact is they're an introduced species. You can see now what impact they're having on the nature fauna, and what's more, they're infested with Cyrex wasps and are basically not useful for anything. Here is a wonderful opportunity to, not at the expense of the golf course, but to get this area and make the golf course part of a natural vegetation area, and thereby re-attract the flora and the fauna that would make this area such a special place, and it'd be a wonderful opportunity to turn back the tide in favour of decent land management. That is not the matter that is before us today, but I'm just simply saying it's a great opportunity to at least get some development in this area, and then hopefully with the economic benefits that flow from that, that maybe council consider about developing a proper park that suits this particular soil type, this particular coastal environment, and also might reverse, I said, some of the introduced species that we have around this place. So with that contribution, and with a nod to the people who are watching this and who are about to fill my email with defence of Pinus radiata, so be it.
The Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and yes, I too would like to thank Mr Goggin for his representation earlier this evening. It is wonderful to be able to see such a quality proposal put forward in our city. I think I recall Councillor Kennedy some meetings ago saying it's wonderful to be able to actually support projects that come before us, and to see such a high level of community support. Councillor Goyne is right. When those of us who were newly elected first came into the role, this was one of those issues that was immediately raised with us, and it was great to see that process unfold and the engagement that took place between the proponent and the local community and interested stakeholders to allay concerns that people had. So I give credit and pay tribute because I think the best developments do that. They engage people, they bring them along as part of the journey, and attempt to address issues of concern that local people may have in respect of these types of developments, and they are significant. This is a very well put together proposal, and it has significant statutory hurdles that it needs to overcome, which, as we've already seen, the planning scheme criteria are sufficiently met to give everybody confidence to support this proposal. And of course there are the other side, the social side, the economic side. I've been reading a bit about the community benefits of golf, and there's a 2023 report that does talk quite a bit about that, and to my surprise 50% of Australians are playing or thinking about playing golf. There's over a $10 billion annual household expenditure that relates to golf in our country. And nationwide, there are around about 1,600 places where you can go and play some form of golf or other, whether it's 18 holes or mini golf or driving ranges or whatever. And so we're so lucky to see quality developments like this being put forward to be located into our city and done well. We can see environmental benefits via biodiversity, flood and stormwater protection, water filtration, carbon sequestration, of course, those sorts of things, along with physical, social and mental health benefits for those people who play golf in one form or another. So this, I think, is a proposal that ticks the boxes and is proposing to be done well. So I congratulate all those involved and seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Walker, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is for approval, and I concur with those recommendations. I think this has been a very patient process, a very methodical process, but I also would note that it does follow on the heels of a former proposal in this vicinity more than 10 years ago, and I think whilst we're acknowledging the hard work that's gone into this, I would also like to thank Mike Clayton for his indefatigable enthusiasm and seeing the potential for this area. It was a very peculiar council meeting some 10 and a bit years ago where I left the state after a briefing where no concerns were raised to come back and find that all of a sudden, when it came to progressing a course in this area, only 3 councillors were to vote in favour, and I remain the only one in this chamber to date that did so. So, as I said, I wanted to acknowledge Mike Clayton in this process, as well as Matthew Goggin for his work and the team that he assembled around him to get things over the line. So, I think it bodes well. I would say to Councillor Goyne, you never know, polo might be stage 9, so we'll just have to see.
Working on it.
Councillor Chong.
I won't repeat all the excellent contributions from my colleagues, but I will just reiterate thanks to the deputation tonight, Mr Goggin, and really look forward to this proposal going ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Darko.
Just to be brief, I will be abstaining from this item as I morally have an opposition to the sport of golf, as it's something that is more a pursuit of the wealthy and ties up land. But I do commend the proponent on the thoroughness of this application.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Well, colleagues, thank you all for your contributions. Before I call on Councillor Hume for his right to reply, I now enter the debate as a councillor, not as your mayor. Firstly, importantly, I'd also like to thank Mr Goggin for his first-class deputation this evening. As we saw with the proposal for the first course, this project is a great example of private investment for public use, activating relatively dormant land and breathing new life into it while keeping the varied needs of the community front of mind. As many of us know, these types of developments are propositions that councils across the world sit up and pay attention to. What is proposed is not just a public golf course, but a world-class facility right here in the city of Clarence. The area will be open to walkers, horse riders and cyclists. In effect, it is a golf course designed around public amenity. This development has the potential to become a community asset, a place for everybody, something that we all can be justly proud of. Colleagues, this development also opens up a world of opportunities for local and surrounding businesses and the local community. Ask Barnbougle, ask Cape Wickham. Golf tourism is a huge industry, as the Deputy Mayor touched on, and the opportunity to have 2 courses on par with the best in the state right here in Clarence will deliver significant social economic opportunities and benefits to our community. Colleagues, with developments of this calibre, I am so very proud to say that our city is now truly coming of age. I wholeheartedly support this proposal and urge you all to do likewise. I now call on Councillor Hume for his right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think we can all feel the vibe. It's you know, a proposal that's enthusiastically embraced by councillors and the local community. Just reflecting on a few comments, I understand that the concerns that Councillor Hunter was looking at were around weed management, and she said she's been satisfied by the conditions that were put in place. I just want to note that includes the development actually can't proceed without the weed and hygiene management plan being in place, and that plan also needs to be audited. Councillor Mulder made some comments about fauna, and it's interesting, while I was reading this part of the agenda, my eyebrows raised. The development will actually have to have a forest practices plan because of the amount of tree removal involved. So that's certainly another level of compliance that is layered on top of everything else. Councillor Darko made a comment about abstaining because of a moral objection. Look, yes, golf is something that's enjoyed by wealthy people. I think people of medium incomes can enjoy it as well. But I also note that the benefits of this proposal are in terms of other amenities, you know, such as the walking trails. And it's also the fact that when people are coming here for golf tourism, they are bringing their money here, they're investing, and this is creating local jobs, and that's something that will drive investment for, will drive economic benefits for people on all incomes. But having said that, regardless of whether this is something to be accessed by people on low, medium or high incomes, we are looking at it from a planning point of view and looking at it on its planning merits, and it clearly stacks up in terms of compliance with the planning scheme. So I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Well, colleagues, I put the motion. That is that the development application for a golf course and associated works at 300 Pittwater Road, 7 Mile Beach be approved subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Anyone against? So carried. Moving now on to item 7.4, the Clarence Local Provisions Schedule, application of Natural Asset Code and rezoning to the Landscape Conservation Zone, Howrah Hills. And welcome back, Councillor James. Thank you. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation, please. Councillor Chong, thank you. A seconder? Thank you, thank you, Councillor Mulder. Thank you. Councillor Chong.
As per the officer's report.
Thank you. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, just very briefly, this relates to an area of some contention, I think, over the many years. As a combat, I think this is a great compromise, which has dealt really with keeping that natural assets in the higher elevations in mind. And this is something that we've talked about in relation to other areas and other developments, and I think this is a really good outcome. And it's also something that used to be the Skyline Conservation Zone, which has been a topic of some time. Our skylines are important, and where they've been degraded by turning into inappropriate pastures, which has resulted in erosions and things like that, I think there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity here to look at to take the lessons we're learning as we're taking these approaches, to look at some of the other skyline areas and look about ways in which we can protect those from overdevelopment and restore them in cases where that has occurred. And hopefully not by planting pine trees, by the way, as an aside. I thoroughly endorse this. I notice that it's not something that we originally wanted, but it is something that where the community have had a good impact, even if they did manage to get out of bed by 5 p.m, to come and put their impact on this particular issue, and as a result of that, we've come up with something that I think is beneficial to everyone, including the representatives. So I endorse it.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I call the next speaker, if there are those in the public gallery that would like to depart, please feel free to do so. We won't be offended. You're welcome to stay all night if you'd like, but thank you very much. All right. Moving now on, calling for another speaker on this motion, Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and may I say from the outset that back when we were successful with, and I worked very closely with the Howrah Land Care Group at that time, and there was a deed that was actually made to the, or in the interests of not only the Howrah Hills Group but also to Council, because Council approved that was a party to that deed, and it was to keep it in landscape conservation. Skyline conservation, landscape conservation. And over time there has been changes to this, and it's my understanding that what was caught up in that zone was a substantial amount of the area that's described on page 251 under 3.1. And in this revised draft amendment, it's going to maintain some of the landscape conservation zone, but at the same time, some of that was incorporated in the skyline conservation zone back at the time that deed was approved. It's now going to have general residential zone, open space zone, a natural assets code and a priority vegetation overlay. And on page 252, it goes into another area of natural assets code, waterway and coastal protection overlay. So the intent of the deed at that time, and I know there has been a series of amendments and there's been a change to the planning scheme, and that has evolved over time, and in the embodiment of this particular report, it does go into great depth about the Eastern Shore planning scheme as we had. Then we had the Clarence planning scheme, and then we had the statewide planning scheme with Clarence Council local provisions. So over time, these sort of changes have occurred, and I understand that a number of members of the Howrah group are in fact sort of a little bit disappointed that Council has not continued and also supported what was in the deed at that time. Now, it could be said that, and the argument raised, that there is that change in planning schemes and events change over time, but there was a lot of work put together by the Council at that time to maintain the skyline conservation.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution on this matter? Right, there being none, Councillor Chong, want to reply?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I think this is a good result to the situation, which, as has been pointed out, has been ongoing for a long time, and I think my colleagues support.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you. Well, Council now concludes its deliberations at a planning authority under the Land Use Planning Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on to item number 8, reports of officers. There's nothing under 8.1, 8.2 or 8.3. Moving on to 8.4, governance. 8.4.1, Southern Tasmanian Regional Land Use Strategy, Strilla State of Play. And Councillor Mulder, you have an amended motion?
I have an amended motion.
Thank you. That's on the screen? Thank you very much. Is there a seconder for Councillor Mulder's amended motion? Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Mulder.
Mr Mayor, although this report is sent to us for noting, I think it beholdens upon us to at least have read the report and at least to give some consideration as to whether we think that although it's a state of play, a progress report, I think it's time that I think it's an opportune time to actually have a look at some of the things, some of the comments that we ought to make about what is in fact a work in progress. So other than just noting it, I've produced an amended motion which actually talks about some of the issues that I see that we need to bring to the mind of the people who are making these decisions, who are conducting these processes. And we can talk about consultation till the cows come home, but a lot of this consultation, I know that not a great deal of notice is actually taken of it, and that we're into the world of professional planners and what they think is good for us and the community. My first observation is that the report, as required by section 58.6 and stated in the report, the Act requires that the Minister must keep all regional land use strategy under regular and periodic review. That was 1993. Just how many of these reviews? There's no doubt there's been a constant review, but just how many of these reviews have we been had? And dare I say that dropping the ball the way they have with this Strulis plan is tantamount to bloody-mindedness and being a dinosaur. And if that sounds disrespectful, then you reap what you sow. My two big issues with this, and I alluded to this earlier on, we're in the middle of a housing crisis. It cannot be business as usual in terms of the supply of housing, the bulk of which has to come from within this artificial boundary called the urban growth boundary under this particular policy. Now, this particular boundary is beset, and the whole assumption that there is sufficient land within the urban growth boundary to meet the future housing supply on the basis that there's expected to be a massive uptake of infill housing, 70% I think, of existing, the old quarter acre or thereabouts lots are now going to become multiple dwellings and strata titled into even higher density housing, and that the urban growth boundary has sufficient greenfield sites within it. The bottom line is there's nothing like the take-up of infill development, and we are not about, I hope, telling people whose kids have grown, who enjoy a backyard for their kids to grow up in, right, to say, sorry, you haven't got any choice, you have to build it. You have to divide your land, you have to provide the housing. And now we've got all the land banking that's going on inside the urban growth boundary by people who will not develop their land for all sorts of reasons, because one of the other things is doing, and that is creating a huge bottleneck on the potential supply. Yet right across the boundary, this urban growth boundary is almost identical land to which has already got houses on it, or could have houses on it, but those landowners are not allowed to increase the supply of land because they're outside this artificial urban growth boundary. Now, if you really want to deal something with the housing crisis, then what you do is you open up and you increase the supply of land, because increasing the supply where it outstrips the demand, you get away. It's what the market forces of supply and demand will then come into play, not, as I alluded to earlier, what the market can bear. And the cost of the market bearing is on the great Australian dream. It's disappearing. Not only do you need two incomes now, you need two decent incomes to buy a basic, ordinary block of land upon which to build a house. Now, to me, and what's happening, of course, is that in steps the people the investors, who then go and buy these lands and then charge what they like for rent.
Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. I would just from the outset say a proactive council faced with what looks like 10,000 plus people coming in right now would be, if it cherishes and champions consultations, holding roundtable meetings right across the municipality wide, trying to explain to people that numbers are coming, what are some of the best ways forward? Because if you just say to people, how do you feel about apartments going there? They're going to say no. When you have more nuanced conversations about how might we deal with a population that grows coming forward, then you can actually get buy-in and actually get solutions. And you've heard me rabbit on before that for me, what our big shortage is apartments that should be located in the commercial areas of our CBD. That's the missing link for younger people starting first out, but also people wanting to downsize. There's a big thing about why I talked about why preserving the parklands is so important. So that's what I think a council that doesn't want to stick its head in the sand would be doing right now, because what is actually happening is growth by inertia. It's all about incentives, and the incentives right now are to go and get a block somewhere between Gilston Bay and Tranmere, bulldoze the house, put up executive townhouses, squeeze as many as you can into the area. Now, there is a role for townhouses, but the idea that that is the solution to just totally change the character of our areas, I don't think is great. When we look at this report, look at also the alternate there. It's pretty modest. It's basically just saying, at its essence, that the urban growth boundary shouldn't stay static, and also that, realistically, not everything is going to be solved just by infill, just by squeeze. But that is a central planning approach, and quite frankly, this document is central planning pravda. It's possibly being paid for on a per-page basis because my computer exploded trying to download each page, because every second page or every third page is just a pretty map rather than necessarily a lot of data. So, it does talk about increased environmental pressures from a growing population, particularly expanding urban areas and increasing car use. Well, everything's got to be weighed up. There is actually environmental pressures when you take all the sunlight away from people. There's environmental pressures when, you can't even, the squeeze is just put on existing areas as well. And, quite frankly, a lot of planning today is just war on normies. Fancy wanting to use a car. Who tends to need to use a car? Not necessarily people that are just going to and from work, but let me tell you, children will put cars into the mix because journeys don't tend to be so much A to B. And we shouldn't be just basically saying that the aspiration of a house with a backyard is a bad thing, or that is something that only the merchant class should have. Yet it seems that in this document it's heading that way, because you go to something like page 60, which is talking about the fact that the mix of greenfield and infield housing in councils covered by Greater Hobart area have a higher proportion of established areas and less capacity for greenfield growth. So, nice tri-central plan is to say that within Clarence and Kingborough there isn't opportunities for greenfield sites, and that actually we'll jump ahead. We'll take a Bacchus Marsh approach, which is to go way beyond the urban growth boundaries and get things happening in more far-flung councils, if anybody dares have the temerity to actually want a house with a backyard. So what we're trying to do with all this, and we're up against it, is just trying to shape it, just trying to say that there'll be a range of solutions. For me, as I said, I think apartments is a big part of it, located in well-serviced areas, i.e. CBDs, but there is going to be a role still for greenfield, because that's a style of housing that does actually suit families. So we need to be naming this up, because otherwise, as I said, the central planning czars are just going to run riot, and the real suffering will be with people wanting to buy homes as the prices just increase, and also people living in our existing suburbs that can just expect the character and nature and convenience of their areas to change, because a default approach means that all the pressures going on in there. So I strongly encourage you to support this modest tack on to just basically say, no, actually, Clarence and probably Kingborough will have a role with some greenfield elements, unless, of course, you do think that the Soviet-style apartments that everybody has, that they don't get to own is the way
Councillor
forward.
Walker. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James and then Councillor Hunter. Thank you. Then Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm buoyed by the fact that this State of Play report has identified some key principles for shaping the region, and some of the principles that they've spelt out are planning for the region is grounded in understanding of, respect for and connections to culture, history and country. Land use and economic activity respond sustainably to protect the region's unique natural environment. So what the State of Play is trying to identify is that there needs to be some changes to the STRUST and in particular to the urban growth boundary. However, it will depend upon whether or not it's going to be designed to be a community-facing document enabling conversations around key issues. So the motion that's before the Chair is taking a different approach to this. It's saying Council disputes the findings of future housing demands and that can be met by supply land within the existing urban growth boundary. Now, the urban growth boundary, okay, we need to have a look at it, and I'm sure the State of Play group will look at it closely, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to, in my opinion, deviate from what is the land use and economic activity matters that are sustainable to and protect the region's unique natural environment. So why not just let it go and take its course as the officers have recommended? Why throw a spanner in the works at this stage and start disputing the findings that future housing demands within Clarence can be met by supply? Where's the proof? Where is the proof of that? And by the very nature, the practice of land banking, where tracts of land within the urban growth boundary are not being developed, therefore restricting. Where's the evidence of that? We are moving to do a lot of work with the Clarence Lifestyle Village. Now, that particular development needs to expand, but it's within that area where it's close to all those services, transport, and close to the CBD, either at Glenorchy or the Hobart City or the CBD in Hobart. So why not note and let the group, then let the State of Play report take its course, examine these issues, particularly in relation to the culture, history and country of the nature, and also to our unique, in Clarence's perspective, Clarence's unique natural environment.
So, Councillor Jones, just to be clear, are you foreshadowing the recommendation if this amended motion is on successful?
Mr Mayor, I will foreshadow the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Mr Mayor, I'm a little bit confused by the amended motion because, as Councillor James said, it's really about noting a state of play, which is an analysis of the situation and some data to then take further to start making some assessments and decisions. So I don't think it is necessary to have an amended motion. Furthermore, I don't actually agree with the points made in the amended motion. As I've spoken about with when Skylands was raised, we need to be looking at infill development, and the whole point is preventing urban sprawl from continuing. So I actually believe the state of play is the opposite of being a dinosaur and is actually taking a sustainable, proactive approach to being able to sustainably plan the future growth of the southern region. And I reiterate to my colleagues that this review is not about what's best for Clarence. It's about what's best for the southern region, which is 12 councils. So it's not about fighting with each other of who can get the most growth in their area. It's about what's best for the Tasmanian community. So please, I urge you to take that into consideration, and I won't be supporting the amended motion this evening.
Councillor Hume, thank you, and then Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually a member of the Strillis Working Group, and there's been a lot of discussions happening through that group on the way forward. And I just want to say that the Regional Planning Coordinator who's supporting the work of that group, Adele Fenwick, has been doing a fantastic job, and I thank her for it. I had a bit of a conversation about this issue with her today, and I think I'm hoping that there can actually be some level of comfort that some of the concerns that have been raised by Councillor Walker and Councillor Mulder, shouldn't really be concerns moving forward. There is a recognition in the development of the Strillis there are actually two groups. There's the working group, which is managing the project of the development of the Strillis, and then there is also another group, I can't remember exactly what you call it, but a group of representatives from the planning departments of different councils that are looking at the actual development of the Strillis. And there is a recognition moving forward that there may be good reasons, and possibly even will be good reasons for changing the urban growth boundary. Now, I note that, for example, so there was an FAQ that was sent around to councils in terms of navigating the state of play document. And one of the questions that was included in that frequently asked questions section was, what does the population dwelling data mean for growth in my local government area? And I'll just read this out. It's important to note that in determining growth in an area, population dwelling projections are only part one of several considerations. The draft Tasmanian planning policy set out the policy framework by which future decisions on growth will be determined. The settlement policy requires the Southern Tasmania Regional Land Use Strategy to set out a 15-year residential industrial land supply. It also sets out the parameters to consider in determining where growth should occur. These include population projections and forecast demographic change, the functional characteristics of the settlement and any specific role it plays in the state or region, the social, environmental and economic characteristics of the settlement, the availability of goods and services, including social infrastructure, to support the needs of the community, access to employment and training opportunities, efficient and accessible transport systems, capacity and cost-efficient upgrading of physical infrastructure. No decisions on the settlement strategy and growth boundaries have been made at this time. So regardless of what it says in the state of play document, there are a lot more considerations going into the development of the Strillis. Now, I guess your perspective on whether the land within the urban growth boundary is sufficient does depend on certain considerations, like whether the owners of that land actually choose to develop it. And that's something that's going to be considered and come out in the review of the urban growth boundary. But I've got to say, in terms of Part C of the motion, I certainly can't support that. It says all suitable areas of Greater Hobart, excluding, etc., etc. And I do worry that is oversimplifying a fairly complex consideration when we look at reviewing the urban growth boundary. We do need to look, though, at the issue of urban sprawl, of incentivising more infill development. It is noted in the state of play that less than 1 in 50 homes are apartments, that most of the homes are medium density. 9 out of 10 homes in southern Tasmania are separate houses. This is not about demonising or disincentivising your block with a backyard, but it is about talking about how there needs to be a range of housing options for a range of different needs. And the issue is not, whether there are houses with backyards. The issue is whether we have that mix to cater for the different needs of people. to cater for a range of housing needs. And the issue of urban sprawl is a big issue. We do need to, for various lifestyle issues, and traffic congestion is certainly one of them, we need to find ways of densifying our neighbourhoods and being able to develop closer commercial centres.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hume. Councillor Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I echo Councillor Hunter's comments that I'm a little confused by this motion. I don't think it's necessary and it's probably premature. And I'd like to thank Mr Maher for the very comprehensive email he sent around this afternoon. And I'll quote one of his points, which was that the State of Play report is the precursor to the revised Southern Tasmania Regional Land Use Strategy. Instead, I'd like to pause there and beg my colleagues to use land use strategy rather than Strullis, which nobody out there understands. So we're preventing the community from understanding what we're talking about if you say Strullis rather than land use strategy. It takes about the same amount of time. So the land use strategy will also contain the background supporting documentation. The issues raised may best be left for consideration at that time in examining the proposed approach in detail. So I think that this was the point that was made to us in the briefing on Friday, is that this is just the baseline document. This is literally the state of play. It's what we have now, and we're looking at where we need to be in the future and how we get there. That will be in the next document, and that's where that discussion will come. I probably have I certainly echo again comments by my colleagues. I have a different understanding of infill to Councillor Mulder. It's not just chopping a block in half and building an extra house there. It's changing the style of development so that we densify our inner city suburbs that are close to services and transport, rather than subdividing blocks further out. And as to the point about the existing urban growth boundary, well, we know that the government can change that at will whenever they feel like it, and they've done that quite recently. I appreciate Councillor James's comment that we don't have any evidence for the practice of land banking. So I think this is a baseline document. We're gathering the information about what our housing is now, what we need in the future, and the next stage is how we go about achieving that. So I won't be supporting the amended motion, but I'm happy to foreshadow seconding the officer's recommendation if that's so moved.
Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I don't think any of us dispute the fact that the Southern Tasmanian Regional Land Use Strategy and the Urban Growth Boundary need looking at. I don't think there would be any question amongst any of us. The world has changed since 2010. Our city's grown hugely. Southern Tasmania has grown hugely. So it needs renewing, absolutely. But I can't support these amendments. I find the logic of going, we can't have enough supply within the existing urban growth boundary, but there is a whole lot of land banking going on, which to me says there is land there, it's just not being used. That doesn't make sense to me. That says there's enough land in the urban growth boundary, it's just not being built on, which is not what this says. I also think the reality is that not everybody wants the Australian dream house. Not everybody wants the house with the quarter-acre block. Some people want to live in apartments. Some people want to live close to a business centre, close to services. They work there, they live there, they can walk to work. It's a different kind of living, absolutely. But we need to be able to allow those things, and we need to be able to encourage infill in our inner city to allow people to have that choice. As was mentioned by several of my colleagues, it's about choice. It's not about going further and further out to make everybody live in the house with the quarter-acre block.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Darko.
I fundamentally disagree with the conclusions of this amended motion. The bizarre obsession with backyards is completely unfounded. We shouldn't all be forced to live on a house that has a backyard. The majority of people who live in urban centres live in apartment buildings. That includes people who have 3 or 4 bedroom apartments for their family. That includes people who have community gardens and shared space. It can be something that is extremely pro-social and accessible to all levels of wealth. And we need options and flexibility, as others have said. We need mid-rise apartments and offices in the urban centre, and we absolutely should be doing what we can to encourage that infill growth. If we can achieve that, we definitely don't need to draw this long of a bow about the urban growth boundary. We can't continue with the environmental vandalism, which is perpetual urban sprawl, these pushing of suburbs just out and out and out. The people and the environment deserve so much better than that.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Councillor Goyne, Deputy Mayor, do you wish to make a contribution to this? Or Councillor Kennedy? So, Deputy Mayor, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've struggled a little bit with this one, and because I do actually understand the intention and the sentiments behind the amended motion, and in fact I do have some sympathy and stand in agreement with many of the concerns that are raised. That being said, and I do apologise to Councillor Mulder to some degree, because I would have actually liked to spend some time, part of that was my timings over the weekend and other things since this has been circulated, but I would actually like to revisit the intention of what's meant in the amended motion that's before us at perhaps a later stage and rework it. There are other issues that I share concerns around related to population growth, urban growth boundaries, a whole range of things. So, and I think many in our community would share the concerns that have been spoken about by Councillor Mulder and Councillor Walker this evening in respect of this amended motion. So I don't think that they're actually not relevant or misdirected in any way. I actually do think they're highly relevant to concerns that people have out there in the community, that we are seeing essentially the disappearance of backyards in communities. I think that's a valid concern. I actually saw that happen where I grew up. Units surrounded our home with everybody subdividing, and essentially my parents left because we suddenly found ourselves in a backyard completely surrounded by double-storey units as a family. That wasn't particularly pleasant, so we left. That's not ideal way to go about planning, but nevertheless, that's continued to happen right across our communities, and I'm sure is in the back of what some of these concerns are. I think there might be another avenue to put these forward, and perhaps look at some of the other issues I personally have in respect of the things that perhaps we should be putting forward in relation to the development of the Southern Regional Land Use Plan. So I won't be supporting it at this stage, but I just wanted to say that I do respect where it's coming from, and I think perhaps there's some further discussion that we could have in the future on it. So I thank Councillor Mulder for bringing it forward, and hope we can continue to discuss it.
Do any other colleagues wish to speak on this motion? Councillor Goyne or Councillor Kennedy? No? All right then. Councillor Mulder, you'd like to reply, please.
Yep. I was going to make some jibes about Councillor Walker's continual references to Stalinism and those sorts of things. And then it turns out he's right. Just listen to you. Is anywhere in here saying that I am forcing people or think we should force people to live in a backyard, or force them to, to develop their backyard, or force them to move out of house? No. What my fundamental point is that there is a vision tied up with the strategic land use strategy. That vision is that everyone, or the vast majority of people, will have jobs in Hobart and live in dormitory suburbs around the city. That is the wrong vision for a geographically constrained city, a city that refuses to build bypasses around its Western Sydney, that refuses to build a bypass around the Tasman Bridge, that traffic is choked because it's going through choke points of the Wellington Range at South Arm Highway, and our solution to that is to build a wider South Arm Highway equals a wider morning peak hour car park. That's our solutions. The vision we've got to challenge here is that this city is geographically constrained. We need to get employment out into the regions. We need to create places like Sorell and indeed Clarence and Brighton and Kingborough as separate cities to where people can travel to those cities. That's the vision we're talking about here. The idea that you just have to keep sprawling and you have to build bigger and better roadways to get people into a city that, if you take a wander down the street and have a look at the vacancy rate in the city of Hobart, the people are already voting for it. The vision we have of a hub and spoke city is dying as we speak. What we're looking at here is the potential. No land banking. You're obviously driving with your eyes shut as you go down past road, or you look up on the hill, or you look down at all that land beside Ropey that has been approved for subdivision for the last 20 years and it's just sitting there because it doesn't suit the developer to do it at this point in time, as is their right. And we can encourage infill housing, I'm all for that. But our efforts to date haven't been very successful, have they? We can encourage infill development, but it's not happening at the rate that is required, and that's what this motion's about. We can encourage the expansion of the Strulis boundary. And the report says, and it's noted, it may. But then you have a look at it a little bit earlier on, it talks about how the plan...
Hey, Councillor Mulder, I'll put the motion, the amended motion rather, standing your name. All those in favour? Those against? And that's not carried. Moving now to 8.4.1, which is the recommendation foreshadowed by Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Warren. Thank you. You're putting the motion. Does anyone wish to speak to this motion? All right. That is that the recommendation that Council notes the state of play report and the commencement of consultation, the comprehensive review and update to the Southern Tasmania Regional Land Use Strategy, referred to as some by Strulis. All those in favour? Those against? Anyone abstaining? Well, we put the vote, I'm sorry. Councillor Walker, you're abstaining from this? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving now on to 8.4.2, the Audit Panel Charter. Councillor Chong, calling for a seconder. Councillor Warren, thank you. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. These are relatively minor changes just to comply with good governance and be as up to date with the Charter as we can. I seek my colleagues' support. Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other colleagues wishing to speak to this one? Right, I'll put the motion. That is that Councillor adopts the revised charter on terms of reference for the audit panel as detailed in the associated report. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item number 9. Notice of motion standing in the name of Councillor Goyne, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Goyne.
Thank you. This has come to my attention of late because particularly at the moment farmers are struggling with the ongoing drought, high feed prices, low sale prices, and I just thought that reducing the registration cost for working dogs in Clarence seems like a very small way to ease the pressure off the people that put food on our tables every day, and I seek colleague support.
Hey, Councillor Goyne. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thank Councillor Goyne for bringing forward this motion. I have to say I was pleased to revisit it, actually, given that after having a look at what was going on across other councils, we found ourselves in a fairly unique position of not offering a discount or subsidy for working dogs or greyhounds. So I think that understanding that and revisiting it from a policy perspective was something really important to review, given representations, given, I think, new information around the inability to receive appropriate tax rebates in relation to working dogs, which was something I think Councillor Goyne discovered during her consultations with those people who are operating farms and working dogs across the municipality. I think there was an initial understanding that those costs may be able to have been claimed in that ATO space, but in fact were not, to the extent that we thought that they might have been. So that was a fair reason to actually go back and revisit this, and upon doing that, did take a lot of time to go and look at what a whole lot of councils were doing, and generally speaking, they tended to set the reduced fee for a working dog or a greyhound at the same rate as that which was listed for a desexed dog. So I think what we're proposing here is pretty fair, and I congratulate Councillor Goyne for bringing it forward and seek colleague support.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other colleagues wishing to speak? Councillor John, thank you.
A question, please, through you, Mr Mayor, not a comment. Do we know roughly how many dogs this applies to?
Thank you very much. Mr Brennan?
I believe about 23.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make contribution? Councillor James, we'll go to seniority, then Councillor Hume. So, Councillor James.
Okay. Look, I understand where you're coming from with this, and by looking at page 443, you can see that Southern Midlands Council has a rate, a charge of $38 for a working dog, pure breed dog. The Hobart City Council, interesting enough, $69 for a working dog, and for Brighton, $65. Look, we went through this budget process just on 6 weeks ago, and I sat through every working group and every discussion, and it would have been, and I would have supported it if it had come forward then. What we are doing in this motion is we're amending the fees and charges in the 24-25 to include a new fee for working dog in Clarence. I've got no objection to us, towing the line as Southern Midlands, Hobart, and it was only confirmed a moment ago that there's only 20 of these dogs in Clarence. So, and look, I did have a small farmlet, and I did have a few sheep, and I did have a small dog, but that's not effective as having 100 sheep or X number of sheep or cattle and having a working dog to bring those animals to task. So, yes, look, it's a great thing, but I just don't like the process of out of the blue, we get this thrown up at us. We had to amend the fees and charges because there was a technicality. It came back to us at a subsequent meeting, and we had to amend the fees and charges at that meeting. And now we're about to amend the fees and charges again. So I'm one for process. Now, if we're going to raise these sort of matters, then why not bring them to the fore during the fees and charges debate? I assume, Mr Mayor, that there will have to be a majority decision on this because it's amending the fees and charges. Am I right? Or maybe I would have thought that this is making a change to the fees and charges for the 24-25 year, and that is going to, it is a major decision. And I want to support this, but on the basis of protocol and process, I think it's late. It should have been brought forward at the time we talked about dogs and other fees and charges on sports fields and so on. And now we are amending the fees and charges for 24-25 again. I would have loved to support the motion because I believe we ought to be fair, as the other councils have been fair. But in this particular case, I think it's too late, and in my opinion, I cannot support it.
Thank you, Councillor James. I've just sought some advice from Mr Ellison, the CEO, in regards to your answer of, your question regarding the need for a majority decision. CEO, if you'd like to address that, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Our understanding of the meeting procedures is that the only time that we would need a absolute majority decision is if we were amending the estimates. The fees in this case actually are driven by the Dog Management Act, so it doesn't quite fit into the same space.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter, thank you. Oh, was that right? Yeah. No, sorry, Councillor Hume, my apologies. Councillor Hume there, Councillor. We will actually go in seniority.
A very brief contribution to the debate, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to give a clarification about what I understand the tax treatment to be. But I just want to preface it by saying that this is not tax advice, and that if anyone wants to know if their working dog registration fee is taxable, they should consult a tax professional. Councillor James might be able to offer his services there. It's the case, as I understand it, that the working dog itself, when you purchase it, and I think it would have to be $300 or more, is a capital item, and therefore you deduct the depreciation of it, but then you can deduct in entirety the costs associated with maintaining that working dog, of which the registration fee is one, so it's fully deductible. However, that doesn't change the fact that I fully support this motion, regardless of what Councillor James said about process, because I do believe it's open to us to make a change, even though we're not doing it at the time the other fees and charges are adopted, because I think this is an improvement. It's following, a sensible lead from other councils, and as the CEO has pointed out in his comments on the motion, the consultation has happened in regards to the review of, or the 5-yearly review of our dog management policy, and therefore it is open to us to do it, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Hunter.
Mr Mayor, I too, like Councillor James, would have ideally liked to have seen this when we did the rates and charges. However, what I do commend Councillor going on is the fact that she has gone and got further information and can openly come to us, show some vulnerability and say, well, that wasn't actually the right decision. We now have the power to change that based on more information. So I commend Councillor going for that, and I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Warren, thank you.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're talking about $68.60 per dog, and there's 23 of them. I'm quite swayed by Councillor James's argument about process, that it's not good to make exceptions, but again, it seems consistent with other councils, so that's also sways me. Can I just clarify, please, in your right of reply, we are talking just about working dogs, not about greyhounds? So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Let's see the way the debate goes.
Any other colleagues wishing to contribute? Councillor Walker.
Thank you. And I looked at page 442, provision of evidence which proves to the satisfaction of the CEO or their delegate that the dog is a working dog as defined under the Dog Control Act 2000. CEO, what will you be looking for when you're doing seeking demonstrations of working dogs and their stock working abilities?
Through you, Mayor. I will be taking advice from our rangers regarding their gathering of evidence to demonstrate what the nature of that working dog is, what its particular circumstances and activities are. Thank you.
There can be good times to delegate in the role of a CEO. I acknowledge that. I guess part of the reason for the question is I do wonder about the potential actual costs on the organisation for some, I'm worried that in trying to do a savings, effort for the agricultural side of our community, just the administration burden that's sort of going to the general rates that might be occurring in some of these processes. So I have an open mind. I do appreciate where the motion's coming from, and I'm likely to support it, but I do worry about some of the complexities. The other matter, I imagine, is that with IT systems now upgraded, this is a relatively straightforward process to amend the system. Okay.
So, do you want to make a comment on that? Or those? I think they were sort of, whether they were rhetorical or not, I'm not quite sure, but there were some questions posed.
I'll do my best, Mayor.
Don't have to.
In the context of how we would approach this, councillors will be aware that in terms of our city rangers and the way that we operate under the dog management policy, we are already set up to go and investigate properties for kennel licences and a range of other activities, nuisance complaints and so forth. So this would be a small extension of that activity. And in the context of, some properties may only have a single working dog, but certainly larger farms may have multiple. So we would expect on a number of those properties to be dealing with multiple working dogs on the one site in the one inspection regime.
Any other colleagues wishing to? Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hadn't planned on speaking to this at all tonight because I thought it was pretty straightforward, but just to pick up on a couple of comments that colleagues have made, I think, look, it may just take a little bit of tweaking until we get those dogs that we identify as to be working dogs. But it's for those of us that have actually had the question asked in our time on council, it will be really nice now to be able to give a defined position and say we are in line with other councils. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Darko or Councillor Mulder, do you wish to speak? Councillor Mulder?
Just a point of clarification of growing up on a farm, I understand the value of dogs. And I suspect it's one breed that is actually under effective control when it's not on a lead. I wouldn't go so far as to that with any of the other kinds of category of dogs that we let wander our streets untamed. My question, and probably is something that I know that it may have been picked up, but if it has so I missed it. I know that Councillor Chong has been on a mission relating to assistance hounds for some time. And I think over 2 years now, during all this time, we were going to come up with some sort of a definition and that would then encourage people for assistance dogs, which is different to companion dogs, of course, but the assistant dogs. And I'm just wondering, has that actually happened or has it just quietly slipped through the cracks? And does it take a motion from Councillor Chong to actually get this included into this particular topic? Because I think that is a bigger issue than a couple of cattle dogs.
Thank you. And CEO, to respond, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Certainly, from an officer's point of view, we've been looking at assistance dogs. You'll recall that when we first discussed the issue of working dogs and greyhounds, racing greyhounds, my recollection is that we actively decided at that point not to consult about that because we couldn't put an effective definition around an assistance dog. Certainly there's been some more work since that point in time, but in terms of where we would take that next, it's probably best to wrap that into the next review of the dog policy. And at that stage I would anticipate that we would have a workable definition and the other elements that we need to do that, and then be able to consult effectively on that. The major issue at the moment is being able to consult effectively and put a workable definition around that.
Thank you, CEO. Before I call on Councillor Coyne for your right of reply... Oh, sorry, you're still going. Councillor Mulder, apologies.
I was doing the right thing, Mr Mayor, in accordance with your latest edict. I took a seat while my question was being answered.
You were up there like
without being directed.
Thank you. Restart the clock, please. Yes, Alice.
I guess just to labour on the point is that I'm sure that Councillor Chong probably has a reasonable idea of what the working definition of assistance dog would be like, and I think there are a few examples around the place. So might I just encourage that we get on with it, because if there's so much urgency over a few cattle dogs, I'm sure there's even greater urgency for assistance dogs because they form such a valuable contribution to the community. So on that basis, I'm more than happy to give someone a tax break for a dog.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Before I call on Councillor Goyne, I'm going to actually beg the indulgence of the chamber. Councillor Chong, do you wish to say anything at this stage?
Thank you. Just very briefly, the issue is not us defining an assistance dog for our dog policy. The issue is the state government working out a way to accredit assistance dogs so that they can have a proper accreditation for them in the same way that they do, for example, with...
Accredited cattle dogs? Same way they accredit cattle dogs?
No, accredit assistance dogs in the same way that they do for guide dogs and things like that. And I've been liaising over some time with the state government about this, but they do not appear to be any closer in getting that defined and the qualifications they need settled so that we can then incorporate that into our Dog Management Act.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Goyne, your right of reply, please.
As I wasn't going to add this part in, but as somebody who has actually studied dog emotion, cognition and behaviour and trained some assistance dogs, there is some difficulties and complexities in that area and a lot of subgroups. I know that one of the organisations that I worked with wasn't recognised whilst having a high level of qualification required. I personally don't have a problem with including working dog as any dog with a job. I don't think we should probably discriminate about what sort of role that they have. So working dog can be, I'd be more than happy to include assistance dogs, but again, as Councillor Chong has said, the definition lies with the state government. I did actually seek tax advice and was advised that there was only the GST component that was claimable. That was because to define the working dog as whether it was a part of the household or whether a part of the working farm now, particularly because farm dogs don't necessarily live just a farm lifestyle like they did with my grandfather's dog that was chained up when he wasn't working. So that was the advice that I received, but as we know, the tax can always be, I guess it depends on the tax agent. And I completely agree with Councillor James. I would like to have seen this raised as well earlier. However, as one of the less wet, probably what's the saying, the wet around the ears, I must admit, as I have admitted previously, this is something that I missed, that I wasn't aware of the advice of, and I also wasn't aware that we were the only council that didn't have. So it would have been nice had this was picked up sooner, particularly by those of us who are more experienced in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne, and no mention of dog watchers here, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Congratulations, well done. Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Moving now on to item 9.2, which is a notice of motion standing in the name of Councillor Hunter. Is there a seconder for this motion, please? Councillor Darko, thank you. Councillor Hunter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are only 3 councils of the 29 in Tasmania with a meeting time as late as 7 p.m, of which Clarence is one. While a few councils start their meetings in the early afternoon, the majority commence between 5 and 6:30. I therefore question why we need to start so late and believe it's a time to align with the majority of councils in Tasmania and commence our meetings an hour earlier. Our meetings generally last 2 to 3.5 hours. This means some meetings conclude around 10:30 p.m. Add to this the time to debrief with colleagues, which is a positive team building experience in my view, and being able to drive home 30 to 40 minutes for some who live on the fringes of the municipality and for staff who live outside of the municipality, and you're likely to get to bed around midnight. An earlier start time of 6 p.m. will ensure that meetings conclude earlier, allowing staff, councillors and community members to travel home safely, particularly during the winter months when it gets dark earlier. It will also assist them in being able to start work the following day and operate at full capacity with more sleep, particularly when meetings have run late into the evening. An earlier start time may also be more convenient for community members who wish to attend the entire meeting. Now, some points were made in a deputation earlier this evening, to which I note the following. Perhaps we will see more people from the community both attend and engage with council meetings if we had an earlier start time. Maybe we'd even see a greater diversity in age than those who currently attend and engage. In my time on council, I've actually rarely seen community members my age or younger in the gallery unless they're here to participate in a planning application. That's pretty sad in my view. Maybe this is because the current time is too late for those who've already worked a long day, have families that are young and tend to need to go back to work the following day. The majority of people I have spoken to in the community would consider engaging if they could stop on their way home rather than going home and having to go out again later in the evening to attend. In relation to why the urgency, the date I've proposed in the motion is merely a suggestion. I'd be happy to have a longer lead-in time if it gives my colleagues comfort to be able to support the motion. However, I seriously doubt the Clarence community were consulted when it was decided we'd meet at 7 p.m, so I'm not convinced that we actually need to now. But let's not drag this on. If we're going to change it, then let's pick a date and just get on with it. In summary, let's not make this motion a bigger deal than it needs to be. It's not political or emotional, but rather safe, rational and consistent with operations of the majority of councils in Tasmania. So I seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Before I call Councillor Darko, I don't wish to single anyone out, but if the public gallery could please refrain from making audible comments, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Councillor Darko. Thank you. Mr Figg, we've had situations very recently where other members of the public haven't been invited back, so we enjoy your company. Councillor Darko.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hunter, for bringing this forward. We've been talking about just how late the start time is for quite some while now, and I think this is a really reasonable change. Personally, I would have preferred 5:30, but we're kind of striking a bit of a balance here. It does allow more time for those that working outside of the municipality to get to the meeting, and it also means that, as pointed out already quite well, we're not eking into those later hours of the evening. I don't really have much more to say here, except that I can't have been the only one to have been struggling against the tiredness on the drive home, so it is absolutely an issue of safety, and perhaps we might want to consider a cap on meeting durations as well.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I think we are missing a key component in this whole scenario, and that is the people in the community. And I don't accept the fact that younger people have not been present at that time at 7 o'clock, and that in fact 6 o'clock would bring them out. I believe, Mr Mayor, to the contrary, I don't think they would come out at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock or 5:30 to 6 o'clock is really a time for the families to be together, to have their dinner or tea, and that brings the families together to say, right, we're off to the council meeting at 7 o'clock. We've had a nice gathering at the family table. We've had a discussion about the elector poll. We're keen to fight whatever we're going to do in relation to that. So at the end of the day, we've got to think of the other. It's okay to say that it's okay for us and the staff, and I'm not having a shot at the staff, no pot shots at the staff, none of that. What I'm saying is that we need to think about the community, and they need that little bit of a time to be able to have as a family group and then front up at 7 o'clock. The other councils, they have their own opinion about that. And as a result, you know, it's horses for courses. Clarence is the second largest municipality in municipality in Tasmania. We have certain criteria, we have certain characteristics which bring us together at 7 o'clock. If we go to 6 o'clock, then there is also a temptation to go to 5:30, and then that detracts again from those people that want to attend the meeting. I understand that there is some approach from Councillor Hunter to be able to have a timeline on that, but I think at this stage, leave it where it is, allow the people to be able to come out at a reasonable hour, have their time together as a family, have their dinner, as I think is 5:30 to 6, and then they're refreshed and then they can come out and enjoy the proceedings. And I think if we advertise this a little bit more, we will get a lot of younger people here, and I think that is in the benefit for everybody. I understand where you're coming from, but at this stage I will not support it because I think it's denying people the opportunity to have a little bit of time at home and then come refreshed to the meeting at 7 o'clock.
Councillor Warren, then Councillor Kennedy. Thank you, Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I do thank Councillor Hunter for bringing this motion. If I was still working in the city and public service hours end at 6 minutes past 5, it would have been a challenge to get here and eat dinner and be ready to go by 6, but luckily for me, I'm not in that situation anymore, and my colleagues who do work have indicated that they can be flexible, and in fact on the week following the meeting week we start our workshop at 5:30 and that's manageable. I applaud Councillor Hunter and Councillor James' optimism that young people would be interested in coming to our meeting. I think that, I speak to people my age and older. In fact, somebody spoke to me at Eastlands today to say, I don't know how you do it. I think, unless you absolutely have to come to these meetings or you have a particular interest, I applaud anyone who takes the time and effort to come. I would say that for members of the community, there are alternatives. The meeting is live streamed, so you can watch it while you have your dinner. What fun! Or you can watch it the next day or when it becomes available online. For those of us in the chamber tonight now, it's compulsory. We don't have that option. And I certainly endorse Councillor Hunter's timeline in that you have the meeting, you have a debrief. For some people who live inside the municipality or outside, it's a long drive home. There's also the emotional toll that a meeting takes on you, and certainly in my first term I didn't sleep for about 3 hours after leaving a meeting. It hasn't been as bad this time, but there have been some meetings where it has had that effect on me. So I think an earlier start is better for those people who, for this is a work commitment, and for particularly those people who have work commitments the following day, be they senior staff or councillors with other forms of employment. So I think this can only be a good thing, and it wouldn't hurt to try it. I mean, we can always bring, if we hate it or the community gets really, really cross, we can always change it back again. So let's try it.
Councillor Kennedy, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm probably not going to help the debate too much because, and I hadn't planned to speak on it really at all, I reflect on into, I think, my first year on council, and Councillor or Alderman Edmonds and myself did similar as Councillor Hunter, seconded by Councillor Darko tonight, except we went to a workshop and we did exactly the same. We had all the other council starting times. In fact, we had the days that their meetings were on. And we were sort of saying, look, let's have a look at what other people do. And we were told very quickly that we've been here 5 minutes, don't even think about trying to change anything. And so being someone that likes to get to bed fairly early, I was sort of, I got used to eventually this time slot of 7 o'clock, and that's been the pattern that we've had for a long time, picking up on Councillor Warren's comments. And in those early days, it was quite often close to midnight when we were getting home, and then you couldn't sleep very well afterwards. So I can be convinced either way. I've got used to it now. We did try and change that, Alderman Edmonds and myself, in our first year of our first term, with no success. So I wish you luck tonight. I will listen to my colleagues and see what the general consensus is. I'm pretty happy either way.
Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I must admit, like Councillor Kennedy, I'm a little ambivalent about this. I mean, for me personally, moving to 6 o'clock is really inconvenient. But that's me personally, and it will make my life a little trickier, and I'll have to change a few things, but, you know, we can all do this. I take heart from the fact with this that I talk to the senior staff. They're generally in favour of this, and they're the ones who have to get up and come to work regularly the next morning here, so I suppose that's a really important consideration for us. So a bit like Councillor Kennedy, I'm going to listen to the arguments, see how it goes, and live with the consequences.
Councillor Walker, and then Councillor Goyne. Thank you.
So a couple of points, and I do note Councillor Kennedy's contributions. There's always one of those things that you need to bear in mind what new people around the table, or people that are only recent around the table, have to say, because they are coming in with that new perspective. The 7:30 to 7 change, the world did not end. It did seem to work fairly well. There's been comments about the youth not attending, but I'd make this point, that when I started on council, you wanted to know what was happening, what was said. You needed to come into this chamber and watch. Not a lot of people did, and a lot of lawyers missed out on a lot of potential profit from some of the loose commentary that was occasionally known to be heard around the table. I think that the recording of meetings audibly had a civilising effect, and then we moved from that to video recordings, and we're on the YouTubes as we speak. And that's probably where you're finding I'm surprised by the number of people that tune in. It is their way to be able to participate, to hear, to understand, and to sort of call out things. And again, it can be replayed very easily. And so I don't think we necessarily should see chamber attendance as the barometer of health as far as participation goes. But if I'm thinking of that audience, I probably suspect that they would prefer the current time rather than a sooner time. I try and balance things out as when I was heading in here when I had really young children, and I think that probably a start at 7 was going to be better than a start at 6, where for some people they're going to have to be out of the home or probably not even get home. I don't have the answer, and the answer is not necessarily what I think. It's not necessarily what the 12 of us think. It's not even just the 12 of us and staff. We're ultimately having general meetings, we're having open meetings, and we're doing that because this is, this is or should be a vehicle of the demos. This is something that, at our front and centre should be, I guess, what works for the community, balancing in what is practicable and workable for us as well. And so this is where my concern lies, because I don't instinctively or reflexively have a problem with 6. Probably 6:30 might be the golden time, maybe 6, maybe 7. I don't necessarily see that as a huge problem, but we haven't actually taken the time to just perhaps put it out there about what works best. And I don't think we're going to want to email every household, but maybe it's something that we should be getting some market testing before making a change, or maybe any change that's made should be, look, for the rest of the year it's going to be at this time, we're going to see how it goes. So therein lies some of my concerns with this motion that is before us. Don't try and do a sales job that involves other councils do this, because again, we're all different laboratories of democracy, and I quite I'm not that enamoured with some of those other laboratories. I think some of their experiments are bat guano crazy.
Councillor Goyne, thank you.
I'd like to thank Councillor Hunter for at least putting the conversation out there, and I, like others, would probably like to continue the conversation before making a decision. Personally, for me, I'm relatively ambivalent. I have a small human that operates at all hours of the day and night, and he doesn't care, and he'll be awake half the night tonight and probably tomorrow because I've left him today. So really, at the end of the day, it makes little to no difference to me personally. As Councillor Hunter's aware, I'd probably go for a morning if I could, and I would also argue that we'd probably get more people that can't hold up 500 pages without a lectern coming in the morning since they don't have to come out of a night time. And I'm sure the gallery will appreciate my tongue-in-cheek reference there. So there could be argues either way, I'm sure, and for me, you know, most of my friends don't have jobs and haven't since the pandemic, so they'd probably prefer to come along during the day. So you can, but it would be nice to sort of do some sort of community consultation. Perhaps we could have an elector poll and just see what the community genuinely wants. You know, with flexible work shifts these days, you know, there's a possibility that more people would attend during the day. And the capacity to perhaps make online deputations or video deputations might also change that for people too. I personally don't like leaving the house, much less putting, you know, anything other than pyjamas on. So perhaps if they could do that from the comfort of their own home, that would, you know, increase participation. So it's always good to have a conversation, and I appreciate the start of one. And I'd probably appreciate an ongoing conversation before making a decision one way or the other.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Mulder, please.
Don't mess with form, people. Here we have a packed gallery. We are the top-rating YouTube channel. People who haven't got a life are affixed by what we say and do in here. Come on, people, get real. Name one House of Parliament that judges whether it's engaged with its community by the number of people in the gallery. Come on. Council meetings are about council decisions, and I am not the only one, I'm sure, that finds an awful lot of it very, very boring and very, very less than riveting. And I am guilty that if I happen to be away and I'm not here, I actually don't tune into the live broadcast. It's not that riveting. So forgive me for that. Now, it's easy to come in here, as some seem to do, and if there's one little thing wrong with a particular idea, then we can't agree with it. And the saying that goes with that, it's got nothing to do with the Venn diagrams, by the way, is that now I've lost my own train of thought. Anyway, moving on. There's something about the timing of these things. Good luck if you think that starting an hour early means we finish an hour early. Parkinson's law comes to mind, which is, to paraphrase it, work will expand to fill the time allotted for its completion. Which is why some of us regularly get gonged out in the 5 minutes, you know. So that's the thing. I don't wear any of those things. I wear the fact is that we're here to do a job, and I know people criticise me because I like to have a say in everything else, but that's what I was elected for. I was elected so the community, for those who bother, can find out what I think, their elected representative, so I can put my view out there so that they can see that. So I'm not about necessarily short meetings, but I am about meetings at a time that is productive. And for me, it would be really productive if we were to meet sort of, mid-morning. That's about the most productive time of anyone's working day, and then and then you could go to lunch and you could sort out some of the squabbles over lunch. But we are not paid full-time work, so we don't have that luxury. The only test I put to this is it suitable? Is there anyone around this chamber who would find, with their full-time job, 5:30, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, would find it difficult to make it at that particular time? Because that was the arrangement when we got here. Now, I did the point and I threw it out there. I think there's only one person who's really affected by it at the moment, and that person has the flexibility, they said, and they can live with the change. And I think certainly the earlier the better. But don't go hanging out there thinking that you're going to get home an hour earlier because it behaved. I think there's usually a book as to how long the council meetings are going to go, and I will not entertain it because the moment I say it, it'll be an hour longer. So, I'll support the motion. Yeah, there are a few little considerations. We were elected. 7 o'clock was the time frame. The time to have this discussion was right at the beginning, when we first set up the council meetings and we have a discussion. But, as Councillor Kennedy found out, there are a few, shall we say, troglodytes about who don't want to change anything, and if anyone suggests anyone who change it and they haven't been on council for 30 years, suddenly their view doesn't count. Now, I don't agree with that, and I would feel very annoyed if people did. But when we're talking about the change, that's the time to do it, at the beginning of the council sessions where we can do it. But having said that, I'll take this up. There hasn't been much consultation, I'll agree, but the change is not so dramatic, but I will be careful to see how it affects our ratings.
Thank you, Councillor Moller. And just to clarify and be very clear to those of us who join us at the public gallery tonight, it is clearly about quality, not quantity. So, Councillor Hume, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to proceed with this change and to proceed with it from the next meeting. The majority of people who are going to be affected by this, as we can see by the attendance in the public gallery, is the councillors around this table and the staff. I am actually optimistic that starting an hour earlier would mean finishing an hour earlier. Councillor Moulder's comment is based on the premise that people are going to talk less just because it's later, and I think that's optimistic. As someone with young children, I understand this change will affect different people differently. It's always hard to find a happy medium. But for me personally, I think a number of other councillors would find this safer and more convenient, as Councillor Hunter's pointed out. I have young children. I do work full time. 6 o'clock is a fairly convenient time for me. I don't feel that it's that dramatic a change. I don't have a problem with giving it a go. And look, if we get a massive backlash from the community, then we can always change it back again. But I suspect we won't.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm a little bit surprised to be debating this motion tonight, as it was something that I probably thought would have been subject to a workshop at the very least prior to coming forward as a motion to give councillors time to speak to communities, think about it themselves and the implications for their own particular routines. But there are a number of factors, it's before us, and there are a number of factors that we would need to think about. And of course, community involvement, regardless of how many people actually show up on any given night. Sometimes we have a packed house, sometimes we don't. That's really at the heart of what we actually do here in our role. And so I heavily weight my considerations in relation to, the capacity for people in our community to participate in public meetings and to come along. It's part of a healthy government. It's part of effective planning and decision-making process. It's about being open and transparent and all of those sorts of things. And we've got to remember the sorts of people that we actually have in our community and the demographics. We've got 39.2% of our community are two-parent families, 17.2% are single-parent families, 53.7% of our residents above 15 years of age or work full-time, 35.6% work part-time. We're all very time-poor in lots of ways, and for me, I think that 5 to 7 period is filled up with a whole lot of things that might prevent people from actually getting here, and that worries me enormously. That perhaps I think that 7, for me personally, I think that 7 if I'm making a decision now without going out to any consultation with our community, I would say that I think 7 would be a sweeter spot for promoting people's capacity to be able to either attend in person or attend online. But that's my view. I'd also not like to see us keep creeping backwards to changing times that discourage people from being involved in council, whether as potential candidates or being able to come to meetings as members of the public to look at what we want to do here. But then there are the unknowns for me about what are the considerations for colleagues behind closed doors, privately, what people might like to say had we done a workshop. And of course, I think nothing would have been lost in actually going to some community consultation. There's also all sorts of other considerations, and I think Councillor Goyne might have touched on it, about the sorts of ways we can encourage people to be involved, not just in the chamber but online. The way that people hold meetings is changing all the time. So maybe some of those things to workshop a bit more thoroughly might have been provide an exciting opportunity to visit a whole spectrum of things. So for me, I'm not going to be supporting this evening. I think it's premature. We talked about that earlier in a debate. Wasn't the right time to be injecting it? I don't think this is the right time to be injecting it because I haven't seen the evidence and I'm not convinced that changing the time is actually appropriate for right now, but I would like to explore it later.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Hunter, your right of reply, please.
I thank my colleagues for the contribution. Now, we have a duty of care for the safety of ourselves, staff and the community members. Now, fortunately, no one has had an accident on the way home from a council meeting. I suspect if they did, we might be having a different discussion, and I hope that never happens. We have been actually discussing changing the meeting times since the start of this term. We talked about it loosely in workshops when we talked about changing the workshop time. We managed to do that, and the world hasn't ended. Now, to be honest, I wish I had brought this motion to the chamber earlier in the term, but to be completely honest, I was still gaining my confidence in meeting procedures and in raising motions. Hence, I think the time is now. Let's not wait any longer. Now, this proposal is about changing the time by 1 hour. That's it, 1 hour. It's not about changing it to the middle of the day or early in the morning like some of us would actually prefer. It's by 1 hour, that's it. And as Councillor Warren kindly pointed out, we can always change it back if we feel it's not working. And as Councillor Mulder pointed out, people are more productive earlier rather than later. And I know personally, I think more sharply earlier in the meeting rather than later. Now, I think this change is worth trying, and I seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. I'll put the motion standing your name. All those in favour? Those against? That's lost. Was there anyone abstained then? Thank you. Councillor Walker abstained. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 10, which is Councillors' questions time. There are no questions on notice. 10.3 answers to questions without notice. Previous council meeting is listed in the agenda. Questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor? Starting this evening with the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Ritchie, do you have a question? No, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Mulder.
Mayor, I have one. I have been informed that 2 regular members of the public gallery have been banned for not always bringing their best self to council. Mr Mayor, is this correct? B, is this lawful, and what is the head of power? C, is this not a somewhat draconian response to people who have a passion for politics?
Well, that's 3 questions. It's 3. We'll take that as all your questions this evening. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I can confirm that that is correct. The action was taken by me, and the head of power was under the work health and safety legislation as a result of threatening conduct that occurred at the last meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter, do you have any questions? Thank you. Councillor Hume?
Yes, Mr Mayor, just following up from my previous question, which was taken on notice and answered regarding the Flagstaff Gully Link Road. I'm just wondering if there's any indication of when we might get that update, the weekly briefing report on the outcome of DSG's investigations and also the further background on the work council's done previously.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Mr Graham?
Through Mr Mayor, I can get the background information this week. I'm still waiting to find out the information from the Department of State Growth, but I'll see if we have that information previously.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Jones?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I understand that the tender for the Skyline Structure Plan has been let, and my question is, have all of those landowners in that direct vicinity of the project been contacted in relation to their comments or invited for their submissions?
Thank you, Councillor James. Mr Marr.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for the question. The answer is no, not as yet, as you're correct that it has been let. However, we're still going through the preliminary work with the appointed consultant in order to set out the engagement plan and the timelines, etc., and the community engagement will follow as part of the normal program, and that the contact and the method and the nature of how that engagement will occur will be developed as part of that.
Thank you, Mr Marr. Councillor Jones, second question, please.
Yes. Mr Mayor, Council spent ratepayers' money for the installation of motor vehicle electric charging stations for senior executive staff in Clarence in their private homes. What is the cost of those installations, and should they decide to leave Council, would those charging stations be returned to Council?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. CEO, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor James. I'll take that one on notice because it will require a detailed answer.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you. It's been publicly reported that after receiving initial results, further geotechnical testing has been sought by DSG/the AFL in relation to Rosny. With that in mind, as per last meeting, has any communication occurred in any fashion about those initial findings?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. CEO?
Not as yet. We haven't been advised of any of the findings at this point. I recently checked in about a week ago to seek an update and haven't had anything yet.
Councillor Walker, your second question?
Yes. On the 8th of July, Council unanimously supported Councillor Kennedy's bullying motion, and I note a group press conference was held the next day which included 6 councillors who all spoke, whilst another councillor who didn't attend was informed of the event. Was the reason I was not included or notified about the event because I was the only councillor present on the night with a differing view on the Rosny Parklands not being used for a high-performance centre, or was it because of some other matter?
Oh, I don't believe that's the case, Councillor Walker. Councillor Goyne, do you have a question?
Or was it?
I have two. On Friday, I was involved in a rather confronting incident in a local business where a group of eshays proceeded to act quite violently, and we and other families had to hide on the premises. I believe in 2023, Tas Police set up a youth task force designed to tackle antisocial behaviour specifically in the Clarence area. Do we have a working relationship with the police in regards to this matter? And how does sort of council interact? And it's probably a 3-part question. Yes, okay. If we have a working relationship and there's sort of future progress in regards to antisocial behaviour in Clarence that we're working with.
Councillor Goyne, in answer to your question, we do. In fact, the CEO, myself and other senior staff regularly meet with Inspector Keane and in his absence, his team. But CEO or Ms Coburn, would you like to to answer this? CEO, thank you.
Thank you. I'll do my best to answer the question, but we may need to provide some further information. We, as the Mayor has said, we have regular updates with Inspector Keane or whoever's in charge of Bellreef Police Station. And as you're aware, we've periodically run programs with Taspol and other entities in regard to crime and other safety issues within the city. But it remains the case that the best first action that anyone can take when an incident such as you have described occurs is to call the police and ask for assistance straight away, because that will be the most responsive way to get some help. But that doesn't take away from programs that we would still run and seek to raise awareness with.
My second question is the distillery on Richmond Road is, according to the plan, supposed to be a charcoal grey in colour. It is apparently still a very pale grey, and the warehouses seem to be being used. Do we have an update on when it possibly will be according to the plans?
So you're referring to Maguire's, the old Millenthorpe site. Mr. Maher, are you able to answer that one, please?
I'll have to take that on notice, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, all right. Councillor Darko, Councillor Warren, Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions in relation to Middle Tea Tree Road. So the first one is there's been some funding allocated in the budget for the planning of a footpath out to the caravan parks on Middle Tea Tree Road. Do we have any time frame for this?
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Mr. Graham.
Mr. Mayor, yes, so Council has allocated design funds for looking at the footpath from the caravan park. I'll take that one on notice in terms of when my design team's looking at having that finished and then advising Council.
Thank you. Councillor Chong.
My second question is still on the same road. Issues are regularly raised about the state of the road. It's used by heavy trucks a lot. And the damage that those trucks do travelling along the road, particularly with people who live at the caravan park and often walk along the side of that road. Could we consider writing to State Growth, asking them to consider reducing the speed on there or the weight limit?
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Mr. Graham.
Mr. Mayor, our roads engineers are looking at doing a speed review across a number of roads across our municipality, and we're working with DSG on the appropriateness of how we would attack a fair number of them. Our roads team are reviewing sort of criteria and which roads would apply. Ian and I will review that, and then we'll come to a council workshop and then approach DSG. Middle Tea Tree Road is one of the roads we're considering for that list, but we'll further update Council, but it will take us a few more months to develop this.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Councillor Kennedy. Wonderful. All right. Colleagues, we've now arrived at item 11, closed meeting. I'll call for a motion to move into closed meeting, please. Councillor Goyne, seconded Councillor Chong. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. So thank you to those members of the public who attended in person this evening, as well as those joining us at home by the live stream, the benefit of the warm fire in their lounge room. Please feel free to join us here again, same place, same time, in 3 weeks' time. Please end the live stream. So we're free now, but I had to get home.